around the corner, really creeping up on us now. So I just thought I'd do a little video for you and walk you through how I would tackle the Macbeth question on paper 1. So just a couple of little reminders. Paper 1 is next week, and it is an hour and 45-minute long exam. Just 2 questions on it, Macbeth and A Christmas Carol, both the same amount of marks, so you just split your time nice and evenly between the 2. Remember to always write down on your exam paper what time you need to be moving on to that next question, because time just has no concept in an exam. What does 50 minutes look like? What does it feel like? I don't know. So if I sort of like, you know, the exam starts at 9:10, I would always write on my exam paper 10 o'clock, because I know at 10 o'clock I've got to start thinking about doing the second question. So make sure that you do that. Right, I'm just going to get my visualizer up and we will have a look at a Macbeth question together, okay? And we'll walk it through. We'll think about a thesis statement, and we'll have a bit of a brainstorm of ways that we could tackle this. Now, remember, it's a big exam paper. I'm sure your class teacher's shown you what the actual exam paper looks like, because schools have a choice about which prose text and which Shakespeare text they do. Macbeth is normally the first one there, but there will be lots of questions for text that you haven't studied, all right? Don't be confused, don't be frightened. You just do Macbeth and you do A Christmas Carol. You're not expected to do anything else. The question will have an extract from the play for you. This isn't a previous exam question from AQA. It's one that I've just put together because I'm assuming you'll have done or be doing those in class. So I wanted to do something slightly different. And the theme of guilt that I've got here hasn't cropped up for a little while. Key theme in the play, I thought we'd have a little think about that today. Then exam situation, there you are. You've taken a deep breath, you've written down what time you're going to move on to the next question. What do we do first? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is read the question, okay? Read the question before you even look at the extract, so you know exactly what it is that you're doing. Starting with this extract, how does Shakespeare present ideas about guilt in Macbeth? I'm going to put a big circle around that, guilt in Macbeth. And then you'll have a second bullet point. So you're not just looking at the extract, but how does he present guilt in the play as a whole? Now, you have the 2 bullet points, the extract and then the play as a whole. It's not a 50-50 split between the 2. The amount of time that you'll spend on each will depend purely on the question and the extract that you've been given. The extract that I've got here is not particularly rich in terms of analysis. So if I was answering this question, I think I would probably spend more of my time writing about the play as a whole, but it will depend entirely on what you've got in front of you. But it's not a 50-50 split, okay? It's going to be entirely down to you, as long as you write about both. That is necessary. It's important. If you just wrote about the extract or you just wrote about the play, it would make a difference. And I've just realised that I am not sharing with you. Good job I spotted that, wasn't it? Right, here's my visualizer. There we go. And there's the question that I was looking at that you couldn't see. So hopefully you can see that okay now. Sorry. So this is the question. How does he present ideas about guilt in the extract that we've got here? And how does he present ideas about guilt as a whole? I always tend to, before I look at the extract, I just tend to write by it. Guilt, just to kind of like focus my thoughts and make sure that when I'm going through the extract I know what it is that I'm looking for. The extract that we've got comes from the banquet scene where Macbeth thinks he's seen the ghost of Banquo, so a key scene in terms of guilt. So let's have a quick look at what we've got in front of us. Then I'll do a bit of a brainstorm with you, and then we'll talk about how we'd structure our answer for this question. Okay, so Macbeth, I have a strange infirmity, which is nothing to those that know me. Come, love and health to all. Then I'll sit down. Give me some wine. Fill full. I drink to our general joy of the whole table, and to our dear friend Banquo, whom we miss. Would he were here. To all and him we thirst, and all to all. Lords, our duties in the pledge, and we have a re-entry of the ghost of Banquo. Avaunt and quit my sight, let the earth hide thee. Thy bones are marrowless, thy blood is cold, thou hast no speculation in those eyes which thou dost glare withal. Lady Macbeth, think of this, good peers, but as a thing of custom, 'tis no other, only it spoils the pleasure of the time. So I'm sure you're quite familiar with that extract. The banqueting scene has started. He was asked to sit down. He didn't sit down because he thought that somebody was sitting in his place. He got very upset, didn't he? Lady Macbeth, she tries to take control of the situation, loses her temper with him a little bit, doesn't she? The ghost has left. At this point, Macbeth is trying to kind of like bring himself back together. I have a strange infirmity, which is nothing to those that know me. He's picking up on the words of Lady Macbeth there, isn't he? She'd explained to them that it was an infirmity that he'd had from youth. When she takes control of the situation and tries to stop them looking at their king and thinking, what on earth is going on here? Come, love and health to all, then I'll sit down. Give me some wine, fill full, I drank to the general joy of the whole table. So this is Macbeth trying to regain some kind of control, isn't he, of the situation and behave in the way that a king should behave, because his previous kind of like behavior wasn't very king-like at all, was it? I drink to the general joy of the whole table, and goes back and to our dear friend Banquo, whom we miss would he were here. To all and him we thirst, and all to all. Now, clearly this referencing Banquo again. He knows full well what's happened to Banquo. He's seen the murderers already. They've told him that Banquo, they've killed him, and that Fleance has escaped. So this is him again regaining some control, talking about Banquo as if he's surprised that he's not there. Unfortunately, our lords, our duties in the pledge, then the ghost comes back and we see a very, very different Macbeth here. And all of this, of course, is guilt driven, isn't it, this behavior? Now, what we're seeing, I said the ghost enters. Well, the ghost of Banquo clearly is an hallucination, and it's guilt driven. It's his guilt that manifests the ghost. There is no ghost, is there? Only Macbeth can see it. And this is a direct manifestation of his guilty feelings. And that's what's happening there, isn't it? And then we see him very different. Avaunt, quit my sight, let the earth hide thee. So notice all of the kind of like the imperative language that he uses there, with the exclamation marks, kind of like, you know, emphasizing his passion, his fear, not passion. I'm going to say his fear. He is scared at this point, isn't he? You know, he thinks that he can see a ghost in front of him. Thy blood is cold, thou hast no speculation in those eyes which thou dost glare with. All right, your bones are marrowless because they're not real. Okay, he's trying to convince himself that what he can see isn't real. Let the earth hide thee. He should be buried. He shouldn't be here walking on the earth. Thy blood is cold, thou hast no speculation in those eyes which thou dost glare with. It's fear, isn't it? And it's driven by his guilt. This is the manifestation of his guilt, okay? And at the end there, Lady Macbeth, there's a thing of custom, 'tis no other, only it spoils the pleasure of the time. Now, interestingly, she is able to kind of like take control of the situation, although obviously we'll talk in a minute about her guilt. But she, at this point, does not know that Macbeth has had Banquo killed, so she has no guilt about that, does she? And she desperately tries to take control of the situation and do what she can. So the first thing that we've done is we've had a look, haven't we, at the extract that we had in front of us. What do we do next? Well, you've got to plan a question like this, and I argue with students constantly about this, but you've got to do a bit of a plan first. And by a plan, I just mean a bit of a kind of like a brainstorm of some ideas of the things that you're going to write about. So we've looked at the extract. It wasn't the richest, like I say, the bits we've annotated that we know that we could write about. But let's think about guilt in this play as a whole. How was it presented? Well, it's Macbeth's internal struggles, isn't it, that we see? Okay. He hallucinated. So how do these manifest themselves? Well, we have hallucinations, don't we? So obviously we've just seen Banquo's ghost, but we also had the the dagger. Okay. And all of this has started after the dagger was before Duncan's death, but after Duncan's death. And we could say that he is haunted by guilt and then paranoia. Paranoia. All right, he's a paranoid character, isn't he? Okay. The hallucinations are guilt driven. So we can talk about the banqueting scene in general before the little bit that we've just had, because there's a huge amount there, isn't there? When he first sits down, he says, I can't sit down. He turns on the nobles, doesn't he? Which one of you has done this? He demands before he realizes what it is. And he's scared in this scene. He's unraveling, isn't he? And this is all guilt driven, this entire scene, isn't it? The manifestation of the ghost, but also the dagger, because he was even guilty before he killed Duncan. I mean, the thing is, I think everything that happens in this play after the death of Duncan, you could argue is driven by guilt. Everything. There's not one action that he kind of takes, is there, that isn't driven by it. He talks about he has a desperate desire to cleanse, doesn't he? We have the quote, we'll all create Neptune's oceans, yeah, because he knows, but that he can't kind of nothing is going to make this guilt go away. We have the recurring motif of blood, don't we, in this play? Okay. And if we're talking about devices, Shakespeare, you can see that, uses soliloquies, doesn't it? It's a dramatic device to reveal, uses soliloquies, sorry, to reveal Macbeth's inner turmoil. Okay, so any of the big soliloquies that he uses are to do with guilt, aren't they? So why has Shakespeare used this theme of guilt? Well, I think we must remember contextually as well, it's a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition. Okay, because remember, Shakespeare is warning his audience that if you become too ambitious and do these dreadful things, what will happen? So it's the consequences of going against the natural order, isn't it? Okay. Macbeth should not have been king. He changed things, didn't he? And therefore, he's punished in this way. Now the question was about guilt. So obviously, it wasn't about just Macbeth's guilt. We've got absolutely loads that we could say about Lady Macbeth as well, who was clearly strong and ambitious at the start. Guilt drives a wedge, we could say, couldn't we? Drives a wedge between them. Okay, because as soon as they stop acting like Team Macbeth, that's kind of when everything goes wrong, doesn't it? And they withdraw within themselves, and it's guilt that does that. He becomes obsessed and consumed by his own guilt. Her guilt overpowers her to the point, obviously, that she hallucinates as well. Okay, the recurring motif of blood, we had the out, damn spot, don't we? And the repeated hand washing. Very different to a little water will clear us of the deed at the beginning of the play, isn't there? And then because of her guilt, she can't actually wash her hands clean in any way, shape, or form, can she? And so, yeah, we've got a lot to kind of say guilt there. And then guilt causes the death of both characters. She kind of taking her own life, doesn't she? Which at the time the play was set would have been, the ultimate act against God, showing how incredibly sort of desperate and ill that she was, driven by guilt. And I think towards the end, although he dies fighting, doesn't he, Macbeth? At a certain point, his guilt has driven him down that path where he's unable to do anything. I think it all becomes inevitable, doesn't it? He knows exactly which the path that this is going down. So like I say, pretty much everything that happens after that death of him. Think about the initial scene as well, straight after Duncan's death. When he comes back on the stage and he's speaking to Lady Macbeth, he's instantly guilty there. And then we have that recurring motif of sleep as well. You remember, Macbeth hath murdered sleep, and there are several mentions of him being unable to sleep. I think it's just after the banquet scene when he's speaking to Lady Macbeth. He talks about how he can't, the most basic healing thing is sleep, and he's unable to do it. And of course, her sleep is disturbed by the sleepwalking, isn't it? So you could spend, honestly, a good 5 up to 10 minutes doing this, where you just jot down everything you can think to do with guilt. You might not get to write about all of this, but some points will be more important than others. But you really need to have a think about that before you sort of like tackle the question. I think it's absolutely impossible otherwise. So you've annotated the question, you've jotted down a few ideas there about the text, you've given yourself a bit of a brainstorm. The next thing that you're going to do is start answering the question, and you need to start with a good thesis statement. So I'm pretty sure you will have been practicing these in lessons. They are so powerful. They're such a good start to your essay. I think it's brilliant in the sense that you know exactly how to get that essay started as well. And you're not going, oh, what shall I write? What shall I write? You write a good thesis statement, and it might look something like this. Remember, another word for your thesis statement is your big idea. And what I mean by your big idea is what is it that you want to say about guilt? Okay, so we might write something like Shakespeare presents the theme of guilt prominently in his play. Play Macbeth through the actions, thoughts, and I'm going to say emotional turmoil of the main character, Macbeth, as well as his, I'm going to quote here, although I don't have to in my thesis statement, his partner in greatness, comma, Lady Macbeth. The exploration of guilt, I'm going to say, of guilt is a central aspect of the plays. I hope I can spell this word. Psychological depth and moral complexity, and results in both his and his wife's eventual downfall. Their guilt symbolizes the consequences of moral corruption, because they are morally corrupt, aren't they? Of moral corruption and the devastating impact of guilt. There we go. That will do. Okay. Okay. Shakespeare presents the theme of guilt prominently in his play Macbeth through the actions, thoughts, and emotional turmoil of the main character Macbeth, as well as his partner in greatness, Lady Macbeth. The exploration of guilt is a central aspect of the play's psychological depth and moral complexity, and results in both his and his wife's eventual downfall. Their guilt symbolizes the consequences of moral corruption and the devastating impact of guilt. Right, because, and I've got some like a bit of context in there as well. The whole point about this play, it is psychologically, it is about the psychology of what happens to these characters, isn't it? It's the guilt that kills them. It's the inability to live with what they've done. And we have to sort of bear in mind that this was a cautionary tale that Shakespeare was telling us, wasn't he? He was saying, because people did plot against the king at that time, gunpowder plot, yeah, not long before the play was written, and that people did plot against King James, that we know for a fact, that this is a cautionary tale. And I think guilt being one of the kind of like most important themes. It's like I say, everything after the death of Duncan, everything that happens in some way, shape, or form is linked to guilt of those characters. So honestly, you could write about whatever you wanted to, as long as you can link it to the essay question. So you're not just storytelling, but you're saying that this is a consequence of guilt. This is how you start it. What are you going to do next? Well, you're going to do a series of what, how, why paragraphs. We sometimes talk about one in, one out. Okay, so you might do one paragraph from the extract and then one paragraph from the play as a whole. Okay, that's a perfectly acceptable way of doing it. Or you might do your thesis statement, and then you might go in, you know, so a couple of paragraphs about the extract. You might then go out, play as a whole, and then a conclusion. How you structure at that point is now entirely up to you. I said to you that I think I'd have probably written more about the play as a whole for this question than I would the extract, because the extract wasn't terribly language rich, I didn't think. Okay, but as long as you write about both, that's perfectly okay. If it's 30% the extract, 70% the play as a whole, that is absolutely fine. Okay, but as long as you're doing these what, how, and why, what has Shakespeare done? Back it up with a quote or close reference to the text. Don't forget that the mark scheme does not say exact quote. It says close reference to the text. If you cannot remember the exact words, but you're referencing something that's happened, that's perfectly acceptable. Remember, guys, this is not a memory test of who can remember the most quotes. If you've got those quotes at your fingertips, that's great. If you haven't and you can't remember them perfectly, but you can remember them, you know, pretty closely, that's fine. You're not going to lose marks. You don't lose marks anyway. You're only ever gaining marks with an exam answer for not getting the quote quite right. So please don't panic about that. However, the better you know this play, you know, in terms of sort of like plot and character, the easier it's going to be for you to answer the question, isn't it? So you've done your thesis statement, you've used the what, how, why, and you've talked about both the extract and you've talked about the play as a whole, and then you will come to a bit of a conclusion at the end where you kind of like link back to what you sort of said at the beginning in your thesis statement. And your conclusion could just be a couple of lines long, and that's fine. And then you're done. Okay. Hope that was a little bit helpful. Yeah, good. Just follow that structure and you'll be onto a good one there, and it will work well. I will be doing some about a Christmas Carol for you as well, so I'm going to have a look at that as well. So watch this space. So I will be doing some bits and bobs and popping them onto YouTube, and we'll make sure that you get an email each time that I do it, so you know what it is that I'm doing. Take care. Do some revision, guys. It will pay you off at the end there, and you'll be really glad that you did it. All right. Good luck as well. See you soon.